So, hello there, Callum Johns here, and welcome to another Expanded Universe novel review. This time I'm going to be talking about Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster. The first part will be a fun fact about this book, because it's quite interesting how it was written to be the sequel to the original Star Wars movie, which is now titled A New Hope, if it flopped. And there are a lot of interesting ideas in here that were reused, but slightly differently, in later movies, which I'll be touching upon throughout this review. So, I may as well just get to my points now, and say about the first thing I thought that comes up, because I took notes while I was reading it, so they're just in that order, was that Vader is referred to as Tarkin's henchman. Now, I made note of this because I always thought that Vader is still superior to Tarkin, but he was helping Tarkin out. And even in that meeting room scene where Tarkin says for Vader to hold back when he's force choking the other Imperial, I forget his name off the top of my head now, it's more like just drawing him back from killing a useful employee rather than Vader's leash thing. Of course, in A New Hope, Leia says that I should have known you were holding Vader's leash, but that's always been, maybe it's their relationship in a way, and how they've run things. They work well together because of Tarkin's doctrine of fear, and Vader's use of fear with the Force, and his demeanor. Okay, the next thing is, like I said, I'll be touching on some things that are very reminiscent of future movies, and some ideas might have been reused. Is Luke's crash on the planet is very reminiscent of Dagobah, where it's really foggy, hard to see, and he crash lands. So that was interesting. And the next thing is Luke refers to himself as a flyer, which I've always thought that really they should refer to themselves as pilots if they're talking properly, as far as it sounds better, I think. But I think that also connects to the Solo movie, where Alden Ehrenreich's portrayal of Han Solo in that movie refers to himself as a flyer. I won't say Han Solo properly because it's really separate to the expanded universe and what I'm talking about. Next is Mimbonite Greenies, because quotation marks, because that's a nickname for them. Sound like some odd mixture of Ewok crossed with centaur things, which I thought was interesting. You'll have to read it for the description. They're quite interesting creatures, how I imagine them, and not how Wikipedia seems to show the picture of them. You can definitely see where they bled some of Han's character, because they didn't have Han Solo. So they bled some of Han's character traits into Luke Skywalker in this novel, which I think was a good thing as far as they could have that sort of character. But then it's also the part where they tend to go and maybe it seems to go very close to the line of what we know about Luke Skywalker as a character, and almost breaks character, but to be honest, not really, because this is also thinking that they're away. So, and in part, I think Luke Skywalker admires Han, so he's trying to make up for the lack of Han in taking on that sort of role. Yeah. I actually thought Chewbacca might still appear, but I guess that him and Han are a package deal, or they didn't think they could do it with the lower budget if they didn't do well with the first Star Wars, and so they didn't have him in there. But instead, they seem to have the Yuzum. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The introduction reminds me of sort of, it's a mix between how Han was thrown into the cell with Chewbacca in Return of the Jedi once he was unfrozen from carbonite. But it's also a bit of how they were chucked into a cell and meet them was a bit like Chewbacca's introduction in Solo, as an interesting parallel thing. So, other than that, there's another creature called in the novel a Wandrella that's described, and I imagine it very similar to the space slugs seen in Empire Strikes Back. The part, if you don't know what I'm talking about, when Han and the gang fly into the cave in the asteroid and then find out that it's actually a giant space slug thing, and they escape just before the slug eats them properly. Not that it would damage them since they went in there anyway, but interesting points. And it's also interesting that the stone dropping on the creature in the temple, a bit of stone falls on top of it and kills it, is very similar to the gate with the Rancor in Return of the Jedi. Which they must have used a similar sort of idea to have this sort of unstoppable creature, and then they have to dodge them around and use something falling on them to kill them. Which is both of these how I read it. Now, it mentions snake, which I thought, does that break immersion a bit? Well, then that's also in Honor Among Thieves, so they may have just harkened back to that a bit. Or then again, I might have just slipped past because snake is a snake. You have snakes in some other parts that are just with a different name at the start of it, and it makes sense, so that's alright. I thought since I read it in here, it's more common than I thought in the EU, because before Honor Among Thieves, in my memory, I hadn't read the word snake in any of the novels. So, there we go. The Yasm introduction, like I said, reminded me of Chewbacca in Solo a bit. Along with, I'll cut this bit out. Editing me, cut it out! I think the last main thing, I'll cut things out anyway, so. And there's a couple of other interesting bits before we get to the final fight scene and a bit of a climax. I've got some notes on that. Is that Anakin must have modified his lightsaber to work underwater, because they use it underwater in this novel. Which, going back to Jedi Apprentice, since I haven't reviewed that, I'll talk about that a little bit here, is that they actually, in one of the major fights, they have a lightsaber short out because it touched water, and they had to be specially modified so that they did work underwater. And it's also one little continuity bit. Well, what do you know about that? Maybe a little bit more than one, but I'll get to that in a moment. Vader's lightsaber is referred to as actually being blue in one part. Now, that's definitely a continuity thing, and probably something they didn't think about back then. Then again, it was red in A New Hope, so I guess we have what we have. Maybe he used a blue lightsaber for a moment. Well, let's make up a headcanon here. Vader had maybe another fight with a Jedi where his lightsaber was damaged for a time, and then he had to swap out the lightsaber crystal with his old one, because I don't know if anything's been done with its old lightsaber crystal in this one, to actually change the colour of it back to blue for while he's working on a new synthesized lightsaber crystal. Yeah, that works. That sounds pretty good. And another couple of things is that it actually has the first Star Wars swear word substitute. Now, I'll introduce this here a bit. Star Wars actually has substitutes for swear words instead of swear words, which I think really adds to the immersion. Because, well, personally I don't like swearing anyway, but it actually makes it like it's in a separate universe. They don't have the same words for completely everything, like a bunch of other things. So the first Star Wars swear word substitute, I'll read out the sentence, is we'll have one staying over time getting them to the surface again. And then, for the next part, I think there's a bit of an Alice in Wonderland reference that is actually after the final fight, but I'll talk about the final fight after this because I thought these were interesting. Alice in Wonderland reference saying, we're late for a very important date. So there we go. And then the final fight scene. Now, just my notes on this, it actually parallels to The Force Awakens, is what I was thinking, and saying that Luke getting knocked unconscious is very similar to Rey getting knocked unconscious. And then Leia picks up the lightsaber, which is like Finn picking up the lightsaber and fights Vader for a bit. And now there's the bit where Luke comes back and whatever, but also in Leia's technique, she's actually stabbing like Rey does in The Force Awakens, which you can really see that possibly it was taken from Splinter of the Mind's Eye as part of this whole last fight scene. So instead of Darth Vader, Leia and Luke, you had Kylo Ren, Finn and Rey. Now, another thing I want to talk about with this novel is there's a bit of sexual tension between Luke and Leia. Now, some people might think that this actually goes against them as being siblings and whatever, but I think at the time they didn't know. So it's a natural sort of thing that they're working out their feelings towards each other. And they don't know they're siblings, so they think they love each other. And even I'll touch on the Empire Strikes Back a bit because I'm not really going to talk about this novel at the moment because I've already read it, and I'll just go through more expanded universe sort of stuff than the novel. I think that the kiss was actually more like Lorraine Baines kissing Marty McFly in Back to the Future, which, as you can tell, was only for a moment. They felt there was something odd there. And in Empire Strikes Back, she did it out of spite because Han was egging her on like he always does. And I always like those interactions. So yeah. Overall, to be honest, I really loved this book. Loved it. I really enjoyed how it was written. All the ideas were in it. We're just sort of thinking about at the time, they were all fresh and new and exciting. If this was made into a movie, I wouldn't complain. I'd go see it. I'd probably like it just as much as all the other movies. Then again, you could say that about a bunch of the other novels as well. And sometimes novels don't translate as well to movies. So, there we go. That's my review or thoughts on Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and I'll see you in the next video, hopefully. Bye.